Welcome to Kicking Ass and Taking Names, the Business Owners Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith, Esquire. Join us on this podcast journey as we help you break free from the grind and get your business to work for you. We will delve into impactful conversations with business owners, corporate leaders, professional service providers, and industry innovators that will provide you with insights and actionable strategies that will transform your entrepreneurial path, boost your success, and put you in control of your business journey so you can kick ass and take names. Welcome to the next episode of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith, Esquire. This episode is titled A Journey from a Storefront to International Distribution, a conversation with Earl David Chinn. Founded in 1979 by Jamaican native Earl David Chinn, Negril Jamaican Eatery is a family-owned fast casual storefront serving up a taste of the island. In 1975, Earl visited his sister in Washington, D.C., where he couldn't find any authentic Jamaican eateries, so he later returned to open his own, supplying the bold foods and flavors of his homeland to Caribbean expats and local fans of Jamaican cuisine. Negril Eats' popularity in D.C. and today's growing Caribbean communities in the D.C. metro area led to the gradual expansion of Negril, the Jamaican Eatery, into Mitchellville, Silver Spring, and Laurel, Maryland. Each location offers the complete menu, highlighting the most popular favorites of each storefront. Today's Earl's sister, Marguerite, his two sons, and his extended family manage the 4 Negril Eats location. Like their father before them, Earl's sons subscribe to the Jamaican national motto, out of many, one people. For the Chinns, traditionally prepared taste-to-go meals unite their customers as blue-collar laborers, lawyers, retail salespersons, clerks, and other DC professionals line up together to pick up their jerk chicken, oxtail, or escovite fish. Negril also offers international shipping, so you can enjoy the handmade curry chicken, jerk chicken, vegetable, spinach, and beef patties, all featuring the herbs and spices that make Jamaican cuisine popular around the world. After going back and listening to my conversation with Dave, a few things jumped out to me. As many of you know, I've mentioned a book that is one of my staples, which is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I read that book once a year, usually at the end of the year, in between during the holiday season. And it helps me re-energize and refocus on what I want to accomplish in the upcoming year. One of the essential points in the Think and Grow Rich book is that most successful people have in common the ability to quickly reach decisions without paying attention to the negative influences of other people around them. This quote emphasizes taking action. You're hearing this conversation with Dave, that he is the epitome of that. He will speak about and talk about the opportunities that came his way and how he took advantage of those opportunities. And he will tell you not every opportunity ended up being a successful one, but he learned from each one. And throughout his 45-year journey, starting from the storefront in the Adams Morgan area of Washington, D.C., to having 4 separate locations throughout the Washington, D.C. area, distributing patties, halal meats all throughout the country and internationally. He will discuss the lessons that he's learned in his 45 years, including the importance of commitment. That there's a distinction between a dream and being committed to effectuating that dream. If you have not read Think and Grow Rich, I strongly suggest that you read that book. And if you've read that book before, I strongly urge you to read it again. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Earl David Chinn. Welcome to our next episode of Kicking Ass and Taking Names with Marlon Griffith Esquire. Oh, my tummy is on fire right now. The man that's my guest today, Earl David Chinn, is probably responsible for putting more food in my belly than any other one person outside of my mama. Dave Chinn is the owner and founder of Negril Jamaican Eatery, located here in the Washington, D.C. area. I have had so many beef patties and cocoa breads, oxtail, peas and rice, jerk drumettes, and the rum cake. I've eaten everything on that menu. Thanks to Dave. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Marlon. Good to be here. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Now, Dave, you're supposed to be retired, correct?
Well, yes. Hope for that. However you call retirement, but it's not the traditional stepping away. Because as much as my children now are running the business, they still hold on to me for some sort of guidance.
And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this podcast. I was just going to say, for those who are watching this on YouTube, in the background, Dave has it looks like a printer, a computer, has a whole lot of paper, a desk behind him. Two pictures of, I presume, is your mother and your father behind you.
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't look like, that looks like an office. That doesn't look like a man who's retired, who's sitting out on his patio, on his deck after a round of golf, right? So Dave, tell me, how did this all start?
Well, when you leave Jamaica as a kid to go away to college, your one thought is, when do I finish and get back home? And that was a thought for all of us in my generation that had left at that time in the late 60s, come back home after graduation in the 70s. Well, what happened is that a family friend of ours opened the first USDA plant in New York City, Tower Isles, patties, on Atlantic Avenue. And he gave me a chance to come in and start there with them. And that was a great learning experience. But after a year, I realized, no, I want to go home. But then this was in the middle of Michael Manley era, with this socialism thing that he was pushing. And a lot of people were trying to get out. And then my father got sick and decided it was not for him anymore. He was tired of it and decided to migrate to Canada. So he asked me if I'd come in and take over the grocery and hardware business in rural Jamaica, Chapel. And initially I said no, because that's what I was trying to get away from. It's this grocery business and hardware and all this. And then he said, listen, it's all yours, the house, everything is yours, if you'll do it. And I said, sure. So I went down and gave them the opportunity to seamlessly leave Jamaica and go to Canada. And I did that for them. And it was fine, except at the time, you couldn't get supplies. And things had gotten very, very difficult economically. People had money. That was the irony of it. They just didn't get goods. And they'd come in to me and say they need steel and cement. I said, I can't get it. And they just leave money on my desk and say, well, you better find it. And, for a young person, mid-20s,
Mm-hmm.
I was very frustrated. And I had nobody else there. I had a house, I had cars, I had, delivery truck, um, going business. However, things started getting tight, and we were in such a rural area that it was hard to get people to come up and deliver supplies. So then my customers then started going to the next bigger town, which was Maypen. And, so that just shrunk my business. And then I called my father and dad and said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. I'm too young to be so hindered. And so he said, fine, and we closed the business. I was fortunate to have a friend who had another grocery store that we were able to sell off all our inventory to him. And then the biggest dealer in Jamaica, hardware and lumber, came and picked up, the lumber and hardware that we had there. And I remember distinctly this man saying to me, the manager saying, Dave, can you imagine hardware and lumber coming to Chapelton to pick up stuff because they didn't have enough supplies either.
Sure.
And so I bailed out, went up to Canada to visit, and remembered how cold it was there. And said, and got an offer for a job, but I just couldn't do it. And so I came back to Washington to visit my sister who was here. And she was working for a cousin of ours who was a physician. And so I said, okay, let me see what's happening here. And sure enough, I'm saying, well, this place could do with a little, Jamaican carryout because a lot of stuff was on Georgia Avenue.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
I got hooked up with a friend who was doing soubrette hot dogs on the street corners, much like New York City. And I started helping him, and he wanted to think about doing a Jamaican type restaurant because he was familiar with Jamaica. And I said, sure, let's do it. And we started, I went on, and then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on my own, starting on the place on 18th Street. And a lot of people said to me, boy, this is the first time there's a Jamaican place west of George Avenue.
Wow. Yeah.
So I thought about the name, I thought of Negril, and this is 1979. And I said, people who have been to Jamaica would recognize Negril. Jamaicans, of course, would do it. And then some kids from Howard University discovered us and realized we were just a patty shop. That's what we were known as. Nobody knew Negril. It was just a patty
Patty
shop.
shop. Now, I must
So we
say,
started there. And my sister was off on Mondays. So she'd come in on Mondays, start the cooking. Well, every day she'd come in and start cooking. And we had 2 meals each day that we were offering. And on Mondays, I would do the baking, then leave, go up to New York, pick up patties, and come back on Monday while she kept the store going.
wow.
And this continued for a while, and then a couple of opportunities came up, different Southwest DC. A neighbor of mine on 18th Street had this video shop, and he had a space down in Southwest Mall where the EPA was. And he said to me,
Mm-hmm.
Dave, do you want a space there? Because he's moving to a big space, 600 square feet, Marlon. And I said, sure, so put in an oven, put in a thing, went down there. And it was an instant hit because all these EPA folks going to work started smelling cinnamon rolls being baked and patties and stuff in the
Oh,
morning
yes.
and coffee. And that's how we started, started growing because my thing in life was always, I didn't have a 5-year plan. I didn't have a 3-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, it's wherever the growth takes us, we go. Because I find that planning and stuff, you frustrate yourself a lot, or you put a lot of pressure on yourself. by just having these set things. And all in business school, which I went to, says you must have a plan. Sorry, but I try to just say, well, let me just grow organically as I could.
So let's back up for a minute. So you did, as you just said, you did go to business school in Montreal. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yes.
And what you're saying, so
The
you
multiple degree in
learned
bakery.
the at least the academic ways of how a business should operate. But it sounds like to me that what you basically did was you kind of followed the instinct.
Sorry.
It sounds to me like what you did, as opposed to what you may have been taught in law and business school, was you kind of said, "I'm going to follow my instinct, and when the
Oh yeah,
opportunity
absolutely.
comes,
Yeah,
it felt
I
good. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go with it."
and I don't know if that can be taught or whether I grew up with my father's business, and so
Mm-hmm.
you develop a sense of what, well, as you said, your instinct, what your
Right.
instincts are as far as business. I mean, is it going to
Right.
work? Is it going?
And maybe your
But
instinct was formed because you had had the experience of working, of running your own business or your father's business back in Jamaica,
correct, exactly.
and
And
you may have
so,
learned things not to do, I guess, from that
right, and
operation.
a lot of it, as far as I'm concerned, that sort of shapes your instinct is common
Mm.
sense. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
whether you run in a
Yeah.
household, whether you think, I mean, how do you treat your people? How do you treat your customers? What kind of facility do you have?
Sure.
These are all part of marketing, if you want, to use the
Sure.
right term.
Sure. Now
And
it's going to be, I'm going to, a little bit later, I'm going to ask you about maybe the difference, if there is any differences between how your sons are running the business and maybe how you ran the business, at least when you first got started. But we're going to hold off on that. We're going to hold off on that for a minute.
okay,
So
sure.
you say your first store, and to orient people, your first store was in the northwest part of Washington D.C. I guess in
In
Adams
Adams
Morgan,
Morgan, yeah,
which was relatively a very multicultural place, even back in the late 70s and 80s.
it was, but it was a great neighborhood in that you had a lot of owners operating their businesses.
That's right. That's right.
It
A lot of
didn't
different
start
ethnicities
changing.
and what have you.
Yeah, it didn't start changing until several years later,
Yeah.
where these restaurants started coming in, and owners started selling and moving out.
Right.
And
So
unfortunately, I'm one of
so
them.
right. So when you said that if I heard you correctly, another opportunity came up for you to open up another. This was a 600 square foot location in Southwest DC,
Right.
right? And then so you continue to now at this time though, you say you're only doing like you're doing maybe only, you said, 2 meals a day, or two
Well, yeah,
specific.
on the 18th Street, we're just doing, say, curry chicken every day, and alternate days we do oxtail and curry goat. And then
So
Fridays we have,
you were literally running a business on patties and cocoa bread, because that was the staple.
oh yeah,
Patties and cocoa bread, and then one entree. That was it.
correct, and the patties.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, and that's where we started. I wasn't married, so I didn't have that pressure.
Okay.
I didn't,
Understood. Yeah.
um, in those days, DC was wonderful in that you could start on a wing and a prayer. Because my
Sure.
kids know that, Dad, we could never do that now because of all the regulations that have come in, all the computerized stuff, the
Sure. Sure.
requirements, all that stuff. I mean, that just wasn't there at that time. I
Right.
remember going
Right.
into the
Yeah.
health department to get permits, and the health inspector said to me, "Here's the name of a draftsman that can do a drawing for your thing." So I didn't even need an architect. No, you need to have an architect, you need to have it mechanically signed off and all that.
Absolutely.
None of
That's
that
right. There's,
I
there's,
needed.
there's way more. There's way more regulations. But let me take you back, because I think there's a lesson. It's a great lesson to learn, Dave, from how you started. And you can take whatever it is, whether it's food, whether it's IT, whatever industry you want to be in. But you kind of focused, right? When you first started, you focused on, well, we're the patty people. We do patties and we do cocoa bread. That's our staple. And you built to one entree, and you all maybe made an alternated the entree. Then eventually you added another entree. So people, you're known for patties. You get them in the door. They say, "Oh, you make curry," which of course, if you're Jamaican, you got to make curry, right? Curry chicken is you got to make curry chicken. You did that. Then you added oxtail, which obviously was more
And
expensive.
eventually we added jerk chicken,
That's
which
right.
we were able to have a pan in the back in the alley.
Yeah, you can't do that now, David. You can't have a pan in the
And
back of the alley.
my sister was back there, and you had some homeless people coming and helping themselves sometimes.
Well, right. That was DC in the late
Yeah, it's
70s,
DC,
early
and
80s for
part of
sure.
the whole thing. And
Yeah,
um, what do you do? But to
right.
take it with a grain of salt, and move on.
So you, even though following the instinct, you kind of meticulously added to the company's menu of services, let's
Right.
say,
Yeah.
the food,
Just kept expanding it.
and kept
And
adding and adding.
bear in
So
mind,
tell me,
we're only,
when did you start your second store? Was this while you were still on 18th Street, or
yeah,
after you
we're
move
in
away from
18th
18th
Street.
Street?
Started the place where the EPA headquarters was in Waterside
Okay.
Mall, and
Mm-hmm.
that was 550 square feet. Bear in mind that on 18th Street we were only in less than 1,000 square feet. It's like 960 square feet. So everything was right there. So it was manageable in that every morning I'd go to the cash and carry over 4th Street Market, Florida Avenue Market, and stuff, from the day's sales, and come back and, you know, did whatever baking I had to do,
Sure.
which I was a quick learner because I had to run up to New York to this other fella who had a bakery up there. And, coming back originally, I mean, the name of the place, original name was Negril Jamaican Bakery.
Yes. Yeah, I remember us talking about that.
Right. So it evolved into the restaurant, and you know, so the next one was up in Silver Spring on Thayer
That's
Avenue,
right. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how I heard about that location and went up, and I think was all right. I'm just going to start opening places, and then we'll find out. And this lady had wanted to partner with me, and I said, sure, let's do it. So at least she would be able to run it. And so I went up and got the lease, signed it, and then she came in, and I mean, she just didn't want to be there. So I
Mm-hmm.
was able to pay her back whatever investment she had made,
Okay.
returned it to her, and said, thanks, but goodbye. Because, I mean, her thing was she wanted to be retired before she even started working.
Sure.
And, and I said, well, so that's how that happened. And we've been there, oh God, since 1985 up in
Right,
Silver
and that
Spring.
Silver Spring location is like, for people who may not be aware, because this is a national podcast. The Silver Spring is like downtown, right outside of DC, and it's the downtown Montgomery County area in Silver Spring. So what I've noticed, when you've talked about at least your second and third location, you placed them where you would have a lot of foot traffic, because in Silver Spring, for example, that's very close to the metro.
Yeah.
EPA obviously is a federal agency, speaks for itself in that southwest part, and other federal agencies are over there as well. So I'm sure that helped with your sales.
Well, at EPA, what was so funny is that I made these cinnamon rolls myself, and we'd bake it there fresh, and people would be coming down and cursing because they're saying, God, we're going up to our office because we didn't even have a proper ventilation system.
Mm,
So the smell of, you know, cinnamon rolls being baked, or we call them finger buns in Jamaica, just permeated through the building.
Sure.
And they were upset that they would smell it and have to come down to eat, to buy get their coffee and these cinnamon buns. And so we did a rip roaring business. And one thing I learned at that time was, which I've always tried to push, is some sort of a zero waste um, operation, where I had somebody at the cashier, somebody beside them, and it was so small, 500 square feet. And they would, people would come in, and the line was always moving. That was the key. It was self-service coffee. They do the coffee, walk up to the cashier, or the cinnamon buns or patty or whatever it was. And by the time they got their change, the food was ready for them. So it was just a complete movement. So people didn't get intimidated by the line outside the store
Okay.
going, because it was always moving. And then I had
Oh,
some reggae music going, soft reggae music. So from that I learned, because I base it a lot on what I want. I hate waiting in line, especially the traffic line.
Right.
If the line is moving, I'm okay, for food. Yeah.
So you have the Silver Spring location, and you're there in, I guess, in the mid 1980s. Now, I believe after that you make a big move. It's a big move for me. I'm gonna tell you in a minute why. But you make the big move from 18th Street over to Georgia Avenue,
Well,
over by Howard University.
it wasn't a move as such. What happened was, an opportunity came up for me on one of my trips up to New York. The owner of there said to me, Dave, this man in Kansas City, built a patty factory. And why Kansas City? Well, he was Jamaican living in New York, and he was the comptroller for the American Nurses Association, who moved to Kansas City. So he was in a position where he could and he had a small business in New York, a small bakery. So that was his dream, was his patty factory. And he moved to Kansas City, the American Nurses Association, and was able to get the funding from the SBA to put up this factory. And he had, hooked up with Orida to do, but they didn't call it a patty, it was a beef ball.
A beef ball.
Beef boy.
Oh.
And he was able to sell it, I think, in the armed services. He got a contract with them. But that went south. And one day I went up to get patties in New York, and the owner said to me, Dave, this place in Kansas City is closed down. Why don't you go take a look at it? Marlon, the next day, I was on a plane going to Kansas City.
Wow.
Met with him, met with the SBA, and it was totally premature for me to try and acquire this place. Because I'd gone down there thinking, well, why don't I just try and pick up the equipment, the kettle, the patty making machine, and all this. And he said to me, Dave, why are you moving? Why not stay here? Because this facility is 3 years old. So why would you want to dismantle it to go where? And you're not ready for it. So my brother Paul had just started with me. My father just died, and Paul had started at Howard, decided he didn't want to continue there. Came over to me and said, can I put him somewhere? So I put him down in Southwest, but he's not that type of person. He's more of a mechanically minded. And so I came back and I said, guess what, Paul, you're moving to Kansas City. You're single, but tremendous mechanical aptitude.
Sure.
And so he said, okay, fine. And so, we're young, still. And he drove down, had a van, drove down to Kansas City, and we got the place. It's like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this now? So I was able to have bought the building on 18th Street because the owner had a lot of real estate in and around DC, and I was able to develop a good relationship with him. And I said, he had offered me the building, so I got a really good deal. Whereas it was, I paid him $15,000 interest only for 5 years. He was financing the whole deal. And after a year, I said, God, I need to get out of here. I was able to make enough money off the sale to be able to pay down the SBA in Kansas City and take over his note. And it was like, hell no, what am I going to do?
Wow. Wow.
So we started making patties. We found a distributor in New York who fortunately was in the school systems in New York. And we
Yes.
started supplying them. And that worked quite nicely.
What year was
But
this? What year was this you started distributing to the
I started
school
in the
system in New York?
mid-80s, just soon after probably 1986.
Okay, so I had your patties way back then.
Oh, so you're in New York. Okay.
I went to high school in Brooklyn. I definitely had your
Oh my
patty.
God,
That was
yeah.
always my
So,
favorite day of the week. Was the
right.
patty
So
day.
we had patties there.
Oh, good
And
stuff. From Kansas City.
well, what happened, the problem with that, Marlon, is between July and September, when you're out of school,
Mm.
things just close down
Slow
on
down.
us. And
Sure.
so, your cash flow and all that, I mean, money was coming in after that, but you couldn't sort of even it out. And so we struggled and struggled with that, opened one or two other stores, and it was a friend of mine, well, a friend, this person I knew, came in and said, Dave, I'm interested in distributing patties. He had a wholesale place in DC, and but it has to be halal. He's Muslim, and we'd never done pork in the restaurants. Anyway, so I said, fine, I have no problem with that. Because he says, so this became a niche market. Because by then there are a couple, Torrells, you had one or two other places that had started in New York, big patty companies. And I said, fine, so I'll do this niche market because my thinking was, if you don't eat pork and you get a halal product, you're going to embrace that. If you're not
Yeah.
halal or anything, you don't care.
Right.
Because so all it's doing is opening up the market a bit, and
Absolutely.
people are interesting people with it. And so that was, really how we got going as far as it. And we had a good sort of partnership that way. I manufactured and he sold. It wasn't a financial partnership. It was just, two things that really synced together. And so that's how we grew, and that was a growth. And then it got to a point where I said to Paul, this doesn't make sense. You shipping patties, let's move up to the Washington area. So Paul dismantled the plant, brought it up to Washington, started a plant in Laurel.
Which is right outside of DC.
Right. And that was 15,000 square feet. We were on the USDA inspection, of course. And one day the inspector came in and said, listen, there's a place up in Linthicum Heights near the airport, BWI airport.
Close to Baltimore.
And, are you interested? And we went up there, so it was like, oh, wow, big freezer, everything there. And they'd gone out of business. They were doing pizzas. And so I made them an offer and was able to get it and had a good deal with the landlord.
Sure.
And that was 30,000 square feet of space. And then, we got going with that. And, things have just grew since.
Going from there.
We got into a couple of different items. We started doing gyros and, for our distributor, all halal. So he's doing the majority of the things, but we've started branching out and finding new customers and all that.
Right. Right. And in fact, large part because of the halal meats that you deal with, you are now international.
Well, Yeah, because of our halal distributor, he's in Dubai, and um, and then we have also found a customer like in Bermuda, and another distributor gets it into Turks and Caicos. And at one food show, we met this person in Canada that does the gyros. So we ship out, and it's all the way up to Vancouver
Wow.
for the gyros. So we, whoever wants us internationally can get us because we're versed in export.
Sure. Yes. So tell me, and I'm going to get back. I'm not going to forget about my Howard University in the grill shop. But let me. How do you? Because it seems to me like you opportunity comes your way, or at least you see opportunity, and you are definitely not shy about stepping into that opportunity. How do you size up if it's because every opportunity is not a good opportunity? We agree with that. So how do you
Yeah,
size up whether how do you size up your opportunities when they've come your way?
one of the things is that this was used to be the old Wonder Bread Bakery on Georgia Avenue, and the story is that Howard University had offered to purchase it when they moved out, and this was rock solid building, and apparently Howard wasn't willing to pay what they were asking, and Douglas Jamel Real Estate came in and purchased the building and wanted to develop it, and I heard about it and went down there, and at the time I know what it is about people, sort of not wanting to think outside the box,
Sure.
meaning that the rent was way too much for most folks. But I'm thinking, I went to my banker, and he said to me, thing that he has upset with Howard University was that it's the one university that does not develop, um, things for their community in terms of restaurants or services. And he was really upset with Howard for that reason. And I'm saying, well, the only thing that was there is a McDonald's.
Right.
And it's and that place was as crowded you couldn't even get in the McDonald's at
Yeah.
the time. And I'm saying, well, hey, this is a perfect opportunity. Here I am, having finally on the Georgia Avenue corridor by Howard University, literally on the
Yes.
campus of the university.
Yeah.
And so I took it, and you know, some other Jamaican places got upset with me about taking the space because apparently it was too close to them. But it wasn't. And I'm saying, well, you had an opportunity to go rent there, but you're shying away from paying that rent. Let me take that risk. And so I opened it, and it was, again, almost instant. The kids coming in to eat and looking after them. So,
Yeah. It seemed to me that it seemed to me like a no brainer given that Howard University, HBCU has one of the highest percentage of Caribbean students,
sure,
right? That
yeah.
go to that go to that university, and it's and at least at the time that you had moved to that location, there was not a lot of Caribbean or West Indian restaurants in DC, right?
No,
Because
and
I think
well,
when you moved, I think when you started up there, I was I started law school or right before I started law school. So as a
it must
Caribbean
have been just before
myself,
you
at
started.
least, right? I was at George Washington, but I lived in the Shaw area,
Oh,
so
you're in
so
George Washington. Oh,
I
you didn't.
yeah, I rode a bike. I had two wheels back then. Now I'm lucky to have four. But back then, my mode of transportation was my two wheel mountain bike that I rode all over DC. And that $1.50 patty and cocoa bread saved me many a day. Many a day, $1.50. I said, here you go. You get my patty
But
and
you know
cocoa bread.
what's
Uh-huh.
interesting, Marlon, is even on 18th Street, I hear from prominent people now, attorneys and all this, who come to me now and say, "Boy, you guys don't understand how much you saved us because at night they'd come in and instead of tossing food and all this, patties and cocoa bread, I just hand it to them, my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't occur to me like it was any big deal.
Oh,
But realizing how much of a big deal it was for the person that's starving, that
yeah.
you have the resources to have a decent meal.
Yeah. I mean,
And
Dave, the
it's
starving
real.
student, the starving student is a real thing. The starving
Yeah,
student is a real thing, right? So I do remember between you and the Chinese restaurant at the corner for my, for my 3 chicken rings and fried rice, all for good meal on $3 back then. Good
my
meal
God.
on the $3. It was like, I didn't even look at your oxtail. I wasn't even paying attention to any of those entrees. I'm like,
Uh,
patty and cocoa bread. I can afford that,
but
right?
that was a big meal. I mean, that's a big sandwich, a patty
It
and cocoa
is.
bread.
It is, and
Yeah,
you all have clearly moved on to to the cocoa bread with jerk chicken in there now, and you
right.
got the
The
cocoa bread with the
jerk chicken
different types
sandwich.
of escovy fish and all of that. But and obviously we talk about your patties. You talk about the halal patty and obviously the beef patty, but you all have seen throughout the years. Now you have about ten different types of patties, I think, with you have with vegetable patties, all different types of patties now. So you are now trying to expand to a larger audience, I guess. The
Right.
kind of patties
Right.
that you
So
offer.
a wide variety. And then my son just came in because he's one of my kids is a real foodie, has developed a lot of the formulas here. And just came in with asked me to taste this Aki patty. And I'm
Mm.
saying, Kevin, that's all well and good. It's really good tasting. I just ate before I came on with you. But you can't get the Akis except in the small cans.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, how the heck are you going to cook this, on any level to do this? Anyway, I'll have to speak to him further about that. But it's a good
Right, because
tasting.
you are thinking about how to scale it up, right? So
Right,
it's a good
right,
idea individually, but is the cost too per the cost of goods too high, and can is for
right.
this thing to make sense from a financial
And just the
perspective.
labor of opening the cans, I mean, that's just crazy. So,
Mm-hmm. 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 So now, and you just mentioned your son, and I think you have 2 sons who are now
two sons,
working
yes.
in the business. And obviously, I'm not gonna give your age, Dave, but you know, your nickname is Fairway Dave. You made that very clear to me because, as you said, you're not very long, but you're always down the middle, right? You
I
said,
try to keep it in the middle of the fairway, yes.
you're always in the middle of the fairway. So, golf manufacturing companies don't really like you because you don't lose many balls, right? But and I'm sure obviously I'm mentioning it because that's one of your passions, right? It's golf, and you go down to Florida and stuff like that to play with your buddies. But in order to be able to get to that point, you obviously had to transition and kind of bring your kids into the business, right? So they can do more the day to day. Tell us about that.
Well, my oldest son had went off to college, and I've always insisted that, just like my parents, they never sort of said, "This is what you must do," and so it was whatever their passions were, you know. Um, as long as I could pay for their education, that's okay. Because this is coming from my parents. My father's thing, although there were 8 children that he had, was wherever you go with your education, I'll pay for it. Once you stop, that's it. It's over. And this is up through college. So this was always the thinking, it's amazing how you transfer these cultures or how these cultures continue through. And so my son had said, well, you want to do something like exercise, something. And I said, Brian, this is all well and good, but you come out, you're gonna make $25,000 a year. Can you live on that? Why
Mm,
don't you do at least a couple of accounting courses? So that even if you come out and you start your business, at least you'll have a sense of how to operate your business.
mm, Mm-hmm.
And by the end of his first year, he said to me, Dad, I'm not liking what my choice was. So, and he started doing a couple of accounting courses and liked it. And so my heart, I mean, that warmed my heart. And so he continued. And in fact, Elon University is one of, I guess, a few colleges that you can actually get enough credits with undergraduate to be able to go straight and go CPA, do your sit for your CPA. Usually you're a few credits short when you go into a regular bachelor's program. So he ended up doing accounting, was able to get his, finish college, sit for a CPA, got through that, and went and worked for KPMG, got a job with KPMG, and he was doing whatever he was doing there, and ended up hating it. I mean, that was just so confining. One good thing about that, he met his wife there. They got married and gave two good, very nice grandchildren. So one day he said to me, Dad, I'd like to come into the business. And again, that warmed my heart because I didn't force him in. So this was after the younger one who did journalism. His idea was always to be at, work at ESPN or somewhere.
Sure.
I mean, his passion was sports, and so he got into the Philip Merrill School at Maryland because I always wanted them to go away. But I said, Kevin, you got this opportunity to get into Philip Merrill School of Journalism. Normally you'd have to go through the regular school and then get accepted there, so you can't pass that. So he went in and came out, and I was able to get him a job, an internship at Under Armour. So one day we're talking, and I said, what are you doing there? He says, well, I'm getting supplies in, shipping it out. I said, Kevin, that's what we're doing at Negril. So
Wow.
why don't you come over here and at least this is a real job. It's not just an internship. You just seem to battering around. If you want to do any type of journalism, sports journalism, you're going to go into some small town in the Midwest, and you'll be carrying your own camera. You'll be earning $18,000 a year. And, again, is that what you want? And so he said he came over, and, he had always been a foodie. He cooked in college. And I'm not talking about hot dogs and hamburgers.
Mm.
So he would send us some photographs, his mom and I, some intricate meals that he would do. It's like, wow. So he came in, and of course, there was this back and forth with both of them and myself in terms of acclimatizing to this culture. And then Brian comes in with, well, corporate accounting. And I said, Brian, it's a small business. We don't. You need to make some adapt, be able to adapt to what we do here. And so he came in and he has embraced it wholeheartedly, and he has taken the business to another level. It was like, oh my, they're thinking digitally. COVID comes around. He was able to get hooked in with DoorDash, Uber Eats, and all this, be able to negotiate really good deals with them. Always learning because, and I think you asked initially, how are they different than me? I'm so much more old school, step by step by step. They want to just know, this is how we're going to explore it. This is what we're going to do. And I'm coming from the point where I grew this business from nothing.
Yes.
And so I've always been holding on to whatever resources I had, whatever cash. They don't have that in their background. It's like, no, let us do what we're doing with what we have. They have not known what want is or need. our struggles as such. Because as parents, Marlon, you protect your children from all of that.
Yes.
They don't need to go through what we went through.
Sure.
Is it a disservice to them? No, you don't know, but you hope that your values get across to them and they understand
Sure.
and appreciate what they have been handed. And I think I've been very blessed that way in that they're like that. There's not the grab it thing, or they, so we go on and they said, all right, Dad, we need this equipment. We need that equipment. And I'm saying, really? And what it has done is it made our processes much more efficient.
Much more streamlined.
Much more streamlined, efficient. Just the cooking times have gotten so much less because of the technology. And I mean, it's not cheap, but it works. And so it comes back, it has been very productive that way. And so they've just taken, and then they said, all right, stores need to be revamped. So the only store that we haven't done is the Howard store, because Howard University doesn't know what they want to do with that building. Eventually, they did buy it back from Jamal, from Douglas Development.
Douglas Development,
and
right.
They've been coming and going with what they want to do with that building.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, because I have noticed some changes with the interior design, particularly after COVID, and it kind of looks more. I guess the theme that you all are going after is more like if you're in Jamaica and going into a shop or something to get some food. You got a lot of ethnic and stuff up. I like it. I was gonna ask you about that. Like, so what is it? What is that like for you, as you said, to be old school and watching and now working with your children, right, on the business? Because obviously you didn't just leave it to them and then you just disappeared. Like you said, it's still, they're dealing more with the day to day, but you're still involved. So how's that interplay?
One thing I've always said to them is it's okay to make mistakes. Just don't make a fatal mistake. That's all. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, because God knows I did. I opened stores and I closed stores. And because it just didn't work. And my sister was there. She came into the business with me, and she has been my rock as far as that is concerned, because it's always, all right, Dave, do whatever you're doing. I'm here. And, I come back and I say, well, we tried that. It's not working. She never said, I told you so or anything. So, that was always the encouragement. And that's what I try and do with
Sure.
them. I'll say, they're doing this. I said, well, have you thought about that? Really examine the cost benefit ratio, the return of investment, that type of thing.
Sure.
And so that's what we've been pushing forward.
Okay. Awesome. So we are toward the end of this conversation, right? It's been wonderful. And as I do with many of my guests in the past, if it's 3 lessons or 3 takeaways you'd like to share with, entrepreneurs, business owners like yourself, that you've learned from, your almost 45 years in business, maybe even 50. I might be underselling you a little bit. 3 things, what would they be, Dave?
Well, whatever you plan to get into, make sure that you're fully committed to it. And I say that because I've had people come to me, and the first thing that scares me is when somebody comes to me and says, Dave, I have this dream. And I'm saying, really? Dream to open a restaurant or something, can I help them? And the problem with that is, if you're not committed to start working the day that place gets open, when it gets open, okay, you've realized your dream. This is what you wanted, to open a restaurant. But what happens after that? That's where the hard work comes in. Are you committed to doing it? Second of all is getting the right people around you. And one of the things I've always said, if you hire 10 people, you're going to lose 9. You replace those 9, you're going to lose 8. And that's how you grow your, I use 10 just as a number.
Sure.
Don't believe that whoever you get the first time is necessarily going to last. And third of all is, of course, your customers, And I've always maintained I might not have the best food out, but I'm going to have one of the cleanest restaurants. I'm going to have one of the best service to you. And the food is going to taste the same each day.
Consistency among all.
You have consistency that way, and just service. And service, because again, I'd much rather hire somebody with a lower IQ, but friendly, than somebody who's super smart with no personality. So, because the person with the so-called lower IQ, you can always train them, and they will become, they will train well. So.
Awesome. I do. Well, I have a fourth lesson I want you to share, if you don't mind, because you didn't share it. You haven't shared it before. Now I'm going to ask you now while it's being recorded, so you're pressured to answer. Exactly how do you keep the damn ball in the fairway all the time, Dave? What's the trick to that?
I'm hitting it short. The first person I read when I started playing golf, and I started playing late, was Harvey Penick. And he said, the woods are full of long hitters. So.
I'm sure the woods got a bunch of GLG balls in there too.
Yeah.
All right, Dave. Dave, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for taking. I appreciate your time and spending some time with us and my audience. Great lessons to learn, and I should tell you this. Every time there's twilight at the club, I always stop at the Negril to get me a patty cocoa bread. That's my pregame meal.
I hope it's helping, Marlon. I hope it's keeping you going.
It depends. Sometimes I come back and get the rum cake. I'm not sure that's helping. But thank you so much, Dave. Awesome.
It's my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. I hope to see you soon, Marlon.
Absolutely. You take care. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. Remember, information is only as good as its application. So apply these insights and strategies and start making transformational changes to your business and life today. If you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and YouTube. Keep kicking ass and taking names.